Some stories don't just get under your skin, they stay there. A woman knocking on your window in the dead of night. But she's not asking for help. A delivery to a street that doesn't exist. A passenger who was never supposed to be in your back seat. Tonight, we're diving into 8 true tales of dread disappearance and things that should never follow you home. This is High Scary Stories. Let's begin. Story 1. The Woman in the Woods. I've always felt strangely safe on the road. Maybe it was something about the hum of the tires on empty asphalt, or the way headlights sliced through the dark like a knife through silk. I used to tell myself that the road was where I had the most control. No conversations to navigate, no obligations to juggle. Just me, the wheel, and the path ahead. That night started like dozens before it, ordinary, uneventful, peaceful. I was driving home from my best friend Harper's new place just outside Willowdale. She'd finally bought her first house and insisted I come over, even if it meant a 2-hour round trip on a weeknight. Harper was one of those people who made homes feel like warm quilts. Candles in every room, music playing softly from old speakers, mismatched mugs filled with too hot tea. We laughed for hours about old college flings, career stress, and the general disillusionment of turning 30. I stayed later than I meant to. It was already past 11 by the time I hugged her goodbye and stepped into the crisp October night. The kind of air that smells like wet leaves and cooling earth. The kind of night that makes you want to breathe deeper just to feel more alive. I took the long way home. Not for any particular reason, just habit. A back road route that cut through some farmland and followed the edge of a nature preserve. It was quieter than the highway, and usually faster since there was less traffic. I had music playing low, the windows cracked just enough to let the night air in. My phone was at 20%, and I figured it would be enough to get me home. The roads got darker as the lights of the neighborhood faded behind me. No other cars, just patches of moonlight flickering through bare branches, and the occasional owl cry carried by the wind. I remember feeling calm, focused, and then, without warning, a pit started to form in my stomach. Not panic, not even fear, just a tiny pressure, like the moment right before a storm when the clouds shift in just the wrong way. I shrugged it off. I had no reason to feel uneasy. But unease doesn't wait for a reason. It just shows up. The farther I drove, the more that quiet weight settled in my chest. It wasn't anything dramatic, just an itch in the back of my mind, like I had forgotten something important. The road narrowed into a 2-lane stretch, flanked on one side by skeletal tree lines, and on the other by fields gone dark and brittle with the season. My high beams lit up the frost-covered grass, revealing brief snapshots of fence posts, low brush, and the occasional mailbox leaning like it had given up. I hadn't seen another car in over 10 minutes, which wasn't unusual for that part of the route. Still, the silence felt deeper than usual. Not peaceful. Hollow. My phone chimed low, a battery warning at 10%. I realized I hadn't plugged it in. I reached instinctively for the charger in the center console, then frowned when my fingers met nothing but loose change and a forgotten granola bar. I paused, searching the side pockets and glove compartment. Nothing. I must have left it in Harper's kitchen after I texted my sister from her counter. Perfect. I muttered it out loud, more annoyed than worried at the time. I still had the GPS running, but with the signal flickering and the battery dropping fast, I knew I needed to double-check my route. These back roads had a tendency to curve in on themselves or suddenly dump you onto gravel without warning. I decided to pull over for just a minute to scan the map and maybe take a breather. I spotted a narrow shoulder near a thicket of trees and guided the car gently onto the gravel. There were no houses in sight, no streetlights, just the dense outline of forest to my right and the vast openness of farmland to my left. The headlights cast a cone of pale gold into the dark, barely touching the tree line. I left the engine running. The sound felt oddly comforting, a little bubble of normal in the middle of nowhere. I picked up my phone, trying to zoom in on the route. That was when I heard it, the sound that made my pulse stop for half a beat. A knock, sharp and sudden right against the driver's side window. I froze. My breath caught somewhere between my chest and throat, my fingers still hovering over the screen. For a second, I didn't move. I just stared at the side mirror, half expecting to see nothing. To convince myself, I'd imagine the knock. But then came another 3 quick taps. Not frantic, not accidental, measured, intentional. My phone slipped from my hand and landed between the seat and the console. With a soft thud, I barely registered. I turned slowly toward the window, heart pounding like I'd just sprinted a mile, and there she was. A woman stood just inches away from the glass, her face pale and streaked with dirt and tears. Her hair hung in tangled ropes around her face, sticking to her damp cheeks. Her eyes were wide, not wild, but desperate. She looked like she'd been running for a long time, her jacket torn at one sleeve, her hands smudged with something dark that I hoped was mud. "Please," she mouthed, tapping the glass again. "Please help me." Her voice was muffled through the closed window, but the rawness of it cut through. I rolled it down halfway, cautious, but not cold. "Are you hurt?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "What happened?" She glanced over her shoulder toward the woods behind her, then back at me. "My baby," she whispered. "She's bleeding. I lost my phone. I don't know what to do. Please, you have to come." My stomach twisted. There was something wrong with the way she said it, the cadence of her voice, too smooth for someone in shock. But then I heard it. A sound drifting faintly from the woods. A baby's cry, thin and distant, almost mechanical. It was enough to override logic, enough to pierce straight into my chest. "Where is she?" I asked. "Just inside the trees," the woman said, already gesturing, already walking backward, beckoning me like it was obvious I would follow. And against every better instinct, I unbuckled my seatbelt, grabbed my phone and small flashlight, and stepped out into the cold night air. The moment my feet hit the gravel, the cold cut through me like a warning. I followed her flashlight, trembling slightly in my grip, its narrow beam bouncing across low-hanging branches and thick underbrush. The crying grew louder, but something about it felt off. It didn't waver. It didn't hiccup or gasp like real infants do. It looped. Faint, then sharp, then faint again. A pattern not pain. The woman stayed just ahead of me, always a few steps too far to catch up, her pace quick but measured. "This way," she said over her shoulder, voice soft and breathless, as if it belonged to someone in a dream. I tried to keep up, ducking under branches that clawed at my jacket and snagged my sleeves. My shoes slipped in the damp leaves. At one point, a root caught my foot, and I nearly fell face first into the mud. When I looked up again, she was gone. I stopped. The crying was louder now just ahead, but I couldn't see her. I called out, "Hello, where's the baby?" No answer. Just the mechanical whimpering and the sharp sound of wind slipping through bare trees. I scanned the woods, heart pounding, trying to catch a glimpse of her jacket, her hair, anything. Then I saw it. A small blanket on the ground, spread neatly in the middle of a clearing. Pale pink with a faded cartoon elephant pattern. On top of it, a baby bottle. And around the blanket, bones, arranged in a rough circle, small and white, some broken, some still dark with something I didn't want to name. My stomach flipped. The air around me felt heavier, colder, like something unseen had just stepped closer. I took a slow step back, my breath catching in my throat. And that's when I heard the footsteps, fast and heavy, coming from behind me. I spun, flashlight shaking wildly across the trees. Nothing. Another step. Closer. I turned again. Still nothing. Then from the dark, a whisper. Low, deliberate. Looking for these. My light caught a flash of metal, my car keys dangling from a pale, outstretched hand. It was her. But her face had changed. The kindness, the fear, it was gone. She was smiling now. And it wasn't human. Her smile didn't move. It stretched slow and unnatural, like her skin didn't quite fit her bones. I couldn't speak, couldn't blink. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide and glassy, but empty of anything that resembled life. She dangled the keys by the keychain, letting them sway gently between us like bait. "You left these behind," she said softly, almost teasing. The crying had stopped. just like that. Cut off mid-wail as if someone had hit pause on a recording. The forest fell silent, so completely still that even the wind seemed to vanish. I stepped back, my knees trembling beneath me. Her head tilted slightly like she was studying me, as if my fear was something she could taste. My flashlight flickered, once, twice, then died. I was blind, swallowed by blackness, the only sound my own breathing ragged and fast. I turned and ran. I didn't look behind me. I didn't scream. I just ran. The branches tearing at my face and arms as I stumbled back through the path, or what I hoped was the path I had come from. My legs burned. My lungs begged for air. I broke through the tree line and spotted my car. Just where I had left it, only the driver's side door was wide open. I know I locked it. I know I closed it. The interior light glowed like a warning beacon in the night. I dove inside, slammed the door shut, and hit the lock button until my thumb ached. My hands shook as I fumbled under the seat for a spare key I kept taped to the underside of the mat. When the engine finally roared to life, I nearly sobbed. I threw the car into reverse tires skidding on the gravel and sped off without checking the mirror. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to know if she was still standing there watching. But just before the tree line disappeared from view, the headlights caught movement. A face, low to the ground, crawling, not running, crawling toward the road on all fours, impossibly fast, with that same twisted smile stretching wide beneath the shadows. Then she was gone, and the baby started crying again. But this time it came from my back seat. I didn't think. I couldn't. I slammed on the brakes so hard the tires screamed against the road. The baby's cry, if that's what it really was, sliced through the car, high-pitched and shrill, like it was being fed through a broken speaker. My chest heaved. My fingers clawed at the door handle before I realized I had nowhere to go. I forced myself to look into the rearview mirror, heart punching against my ribs like it wanted out. There was no baby. The back seat was empty, but something had left marks on the upholstery. Smudges, small handprints, muddy, maybe bloody. I twisted around, half expecting to see her crouch there behind me, smiling from the shadows. But there was nothing. The crying had stopped again abruptly, and the silence it left behind felt even worse. My hands trembled as I gripped the wheel. I told myself I imagined it. That fear made me hallucinate, that maybe I'd fallen asleep for a second at the wheel and dreamt it. But then I smelled it. Earth, damp and old like upturned soil and rotting leaves. The same smell that clung to her clothes. It was inside the car. I shifted into drive and floored it. The road curved wildly through the trees, and I barely kept the car steady. Every corner felt too sharp, every shadow too long. I just needed to get back to town, back to light, back to people. But even as the dashboard glowed and the speed climbed past 60, I kept feeling something behind me. The air in the car grew colder, the smell stronger. I didn't dare look again. Then the radio crackled on. I hadn't touched it. Through the static came her voice. "You said you'd help," she whispered. Not angry, not sad, just disappointed. And then she laughed. Low, breathy, close to my ear. I slammed my palm against the volume knob and it cut off. I drove for miles before I saw another car. I never stopped. I didn't even slow down until I saw the first streetlight of the nearest gas station. When I pulled in and opened the door, I fell out onto the pavement, gasping like I had just escaped drowning. The gas station attendant must have seen the look on my face because he didn't ask any questions. Just stared as I stumbled inside, pale, shaking my jacket torn and damp with sweat. I don't even remember what I said to him. Something about needing help. He handed me a bottle of water and called the police without hesitation. When they arrived, I tried to explain, leaving out the parts I knew would sound insane. I told them a woman had approached my car claiming her baby was hurt, that she led me into the woods, and then disappeared. I told them about the bones, about the open car door. I left out the crawling. I left out the radio. I didn't mention the cry in the back seat. They took it seriously at first. An officer followed me back to where I had pulled over. I showed them the shoulder, the trail into the woods. But the clearing was empty. No blanket, no bones, no bottle, no footprints, not even mine. The officer looked at me like he wanted to believe me, but didn't. He told me I was probably tired, stressed, and imagining things. That a crying fox could sound like a baby if you were already on edge. I nodded. Agreed. Told him he was probably right. But when I got back in my car, I noticed something I hadn't before. On the inside of the rear window, faint but unmistakable, were 5 small handprints. 1 in the center, 2 on each side. The officer didn't see them. Somehow the light missed them when he checked. But I did. I stared at them all the way home. 2 weeks later, Harper called me late at night, whispering into the phone like she was afraid someone might hear. She said she'd found something in her kitchen. My phone charger, covered in dirt. And lying next to it, sitting neatly on the edge of her counter, was a baby bottle. She didn't own one. She didn't know where it came from. I didn't answer her questions. I just told her to throw it away. That was 3 months ago. I moved since then. I don't take back roads anymore. I don't stop for anyone at night. And I don't listen to crying in the dark, not anymore. I keep my doors locked, my lights on. But some nights, even now, I still hear her voice. You said you'd help. Story 2. The Vanished Town. I started delivering pizzas when I was 19. It was supposed to be a temporary gig, just something to help cover textbooks and groceries while I figured out what I actually wanted to do with my life. But like most things in small towns, temporary turns permanent if you're not careful. By the time I hit 23, I was still working the same job at Tony's Oven, a greasy little joint off Main Street with flickering lights and a manager who thought sarcasm was a leadership style. It wasn't glamorous, but the pay was decent. The tips on weekends weren't bad, and most nights were quiet. That night was supposed to be one of those uneventful in-and-out deliveries. No drunk teenagers or prank orders. It was late October, and the kind of cold that gets in your bones had just started settling in. Leaves were scattered across the cracked parking lot, sticking to my windshield as the wind carried more down from the trees. I had the closing shift, which meant handling the final round of deliveries before cleaning up and locking the place down. Around 10:15 p.m., Jenny, the girl who worked the front counter, called out to me with a smirk. She held up 2 order slips. Double run, both prepaid. 1 cash tip. Easy end to your night, she said, popping her gum. The first address was familiar, Hemlock Road, an older neighborhood about 10 minutes out, quiet, well lit. The second one was listed just beneath it, 23 Briar Hollow Lane. I frowned. I'd never heard of it. Where's Briar Hollow, I asked, tapping the slip. Jenny shrugged. Came in through the app. Probably one of those new developments or side roads off Hemlock. GPS pulled it up just fine. Should be quick. I figured maybe it was some back street that hadn't existed a year ago. Happens more than you'd think out here. Neighborhoods pop up overnight like mushrooms after rain. Still something about the name stuck with me. Briar Hollow. It didn't sound like a street. It sounded like a warning. But I didn't think much of it then. I just grabbed the pizzas, zipped up my jacket, and headed out. The drive to Hemlock was smooth. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like the town has already gone to sleep. The street lights flickered as I passed rows of tired one-story houses and porches sagging under the weight of wind chimes and old furniture. I dropped off the first pizza without much fuss. An older man opened the door, muttered thanks without making eye contact, and handed me a $5 bill. As I got back into my car, I pulled up the GPS to find Briar Hollow Lane. Sure enough, it showed up on the map about half a mile further down from Hemlock Road, branching off a curve in the road like a splinter. I followed the directions, watching the familiar fade into unfamiliar. The houses thinned out, replaced by patches of woods and overgrown lots. Streetlights grew scarce until there were none. The road narrowed, cracked in places littered with branches and gravel. I rolled down the window slightly, hoping the cold air would cut through the creeping unease rising in my chest. There was something about the silence too complete, like the world around me had forgotten how to make sound. Eventually, the GPS told me to turn left. I slowed down, squinting through the windshield, but there was no sign. No mailbox, no street post. Just a break in the trees where a dirt path curled into darkness. The screen on my dash blinked Briar Hollow Lane. I hesitated. The road didn't look maintained. It didn't even look like a road, more like an old fire trail that hadn't seen traffic in years. I checked the order slip again. The number was right. 23 Briar Hollow, prepaid. $10 tip noted in the app. I could be done in 10 minutes. I turned in slowly. My headlights lit up dense brush on either side, trees pressing close like they were trying to take the road back. Gravel cracked under my tires, and dust floated in the air, catching in the beams like ash. After about 50 yards, I came to a makeshift barricade. 2 orange traffic cones and a weathered plank laid across them. No signs. No construction. No reason. That's when my phone lost signal, and the GPS app blinked once, then froze. I sat there for a moment, engine idling, staring at the makeshift barrier. It didn't look official. No reflective tape, no warning signs, just a crooked piece of wood laid across 2 old cones, like someone wanted to keep people out. But didn't care to explain why. I reached for my phone to call the customer, but the signal bar was gone. Just the words, "No service," glaring back at me. I tried refreshing the app, nothing. I tried another app, still nothing. Finally, I dialed the number from the slip. To my surprise, it rang twice before someone picked up. A man's voice answered, calm and polite. "Hello, hey, this is Evan from Tony's Oven," I said. "I've got your order, but there's some kind of barricade on the road. Am I in the right place?" "Oh yeah," he replied smoothly. "It's just some neighbors trying to keep kids from tearing up the trail. You can move it. It's fine." Something about the way he said it, too casual, too practiced, set off a flicker of doubt in my mind. I paused. "Are you sure?" he chuckled lightly. Yeah. Appreciate you coming all the way out. House is just up ahead." I should have left. I should have turned around right then. But the words, $10 tip, floated to the front of my mind. And with no other orders in the queue, I figured it'd be over soon enough. I stepped out of the car, moved the wooden board aside, and pushed the cones to the edge of the trail. The woods around me were silent, not even a breeze to stir the leaves. I climbed back in, rolled slowly forward, and continued into Briar Hollow Lane. After about another 100 yards, the road curved and a house came into view. Small one-story, its white paint peeling in long strips under the moonlight. A single light glowed in a front window. I slowed to a stop and reached for the pizza bag. That's when I noticed the figure in the window. A tall man, motionless, staring straight at me. But when I stepped out and looked again, he was gone. A chill slid down my spine as I stood beside the car, pizza bag in hand, staring at the empty window where the man had been. I wasn't even sure I had actually seen him. Maybe it was a shadow, a trick of the light. But my gut said otherwise. I took a breath and walked toward the porch, the gravel crunching louder than it should have in the dead silence. The house looked abandoned up close. Paint curling from warped siding, porch light flickering, door slightly ajar as if it hadn't been shut properly in years. I knocked once, then again. No answer. I checked the slip again. Right address. 23 Briar Hollow Lane. Still something was wrong. The air felt thick. Too still. I was about to turn back when I heard something behind me. Not footsteps, more like a shuffle. Leaves moving. I spun around, scanning the trees lining the edge of the clearing, but saw nothing. "Hello," I called out, trying to sound casual, my voice cracking anyway. "Pizza delivery." No reply. I took a cautious step off the porch, glancing back toward the car. That's when I saw the front door slowly begin to close on its own. Not fast, just a slow, deliberate push until it clicked shut. I didn't move. My breath came shorter now. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I yanked it out, hoping maybe the signal had returned. One notification. "Thank you for your delivery to Briar Hollow Lane." It had just arrived, but I hadn't completed the order. I hadn't even gone inside. My hands started to shake as I tried to reload the app, but the screen froze. I turned back to the house, and the porch light was off. All the windows were dark now. I backed up quickly toward the car, every instinct screaming at me to leave. That's when I noticed something on the pizza bag. Smudged fingerprints across the top. Long, dark, and too wide to be mine. I hadn't seen anyone come close, and yet they had touched it. I dropped the bag without thinking and sprinted back to the car. I flung the door open, slid inside, and locked it with one frantic hit of the button. My breath fogged up the windshield as I fumbled with the keys. When the engine finally turned over, the dashboard lit up, but the GPS was no longer showing any roads. Just a blank screen like I was floating in nothing. The route I came in, gone. No pin, no directions, not even a dot for where I was. I shifted into reverse heart hammering and spun the wheel toward the direction I'd come from. The woods seemed even tighter now, as if the trees had inched closer while I was at the house. The cones and the wooden plank I had moved were no longer at the edge of the trail. They were gone completely. No sign they'd ever been there. My headlights cut through the dark path, but it looked unfamiliar now. Twisting wrong, bending sharper than before, like the road had rearranged itself. Still, I kept driving, telling myself that once I got back to Hemlock Road, everything would make sense again. But the road just kept going. Trees on both sides, thicker now. No curve to turn out of. No clearing ahead. I checked the clock on the dash. 10:49, then blinked. 10:56. I hadn't been driving more than a minute. A flicker in the corner of my eye made me glance at the rearview mirror. The house, still behind me. Same distance as before. I hit the brakes, skidding slightly on the gravel, and stared through the rear glass. The same peeling white paint, the same front porch. Somehow, impossibly, I was back in front of it. I hadn't turned around. I hadn't reversed. But there it was. My phone lit up again. New message. Thank you for returning to Briar Hollow. Another delivery is waiting. I dropped the phone onto the floor. That was when the porch light clicked back on. This time I didn't wait for the door to move. I slammed the gear into drive and took off into the dark, not knowing where I was going, just needing to get away. Behind me, the house stayed where it was, but it never got any smaller. I drove without thinking, without blinking. My hands clenched so tight on the wheel, my knuckles ached. The road twisted endlessly through the trees, every turn a mirror of the last, like I was trapped in a loop. I turned off the headlights for a second, just to see if the dark would break the pattern. But it didn't. The trees were still there, closing in, and that impossible house stayed behind me, always just far enough to see if I dared to look. Eventually, after what felt like an hour, but couldn't have been more than 20 minutes, I hit pavement. Real cracked asphalt. A faded street sign stood just ahead Hemlock Road. Somehow, I had come back. The woods dropped away behind me like they'd never been there at all. I pulled into a gas station lit by harsh fluorescent lights and just sat in the car, trying to steady my breathing. The phone still had no signal. The GPS app wouldn't open. I stared at the order receipt on the passenger seat, hands shaking. The address was still there, 23 Briar Hollow Lane. I looked it up on every map app I had once I got home. Nothing came up. Not a road, not a development, not even a dirt trail. I asked around the next day, locals, co-workers, even Jenny at the counter. No one had ever heard of Briar Hollow. But here's the part that still keeps me up some nights. A week later, while I was scanning new orders coming in at the shop, I saw the name again. Different address, different phone number, but the same name on the account. Same profile picture. Same note in the app, please deliver after 10 p.m. Leave pizza at the door. Cash tip. This time, the address was listed under a street that had been demolished 2 years ago to make room for a shopping center. I didn't take the order. I marked it as invalid and let it expire, but it came back. A few nights later, another order. A new name. Another dead street, always after 10 p.m. And the strangest part, they're always prepaid, always tipped, and always asking for the same thing: extra pepperoni. No garlic, no lights. Story 3. The Van That Followed. I never minded the night shift. In fact, I preferred it. There was something calming about driving after dark, when most of the world had gone to bed and the roads felt like they belonged only to me. No honking, no school traffic, just the steady hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional glow of a diner sign blinking in the distance. I worked as a supply driver for a regional grocery chain, delivering bulk orders from the warehouse to smaller stores across 2 counties. It wasn't glamorous, but the pay was decent and the quiet hours suited me. That night started like any other. I had just finished my second-to-last drop-off at a store in the south end of East Haven. The guy at the back door signed the manifest without looking up from his phone, and I was back in the van and on the road by 10:45. My final stop was 30 minutes away, an all-night location in a town called Maple Rock, tucked just beyond the county line. I had taken that route dozens of times. 2 highways, a country road, a few back streets, easy. The van was running fine heater, working just enough to keep the windshield from fogging over. I had my thermos of lukewarm coffee in the cup holder and the radio on low, playing a rerun of some talk show I wasn't really listening to. The streets were mostly empty, just a few late-night joggers and people walking their dogs under porch lights. The kind of peaceful that lets your brain drift a little. I took a left onto Pioneer Drive, a long stretch of road that cut through the edge of town, lined with fields on one side and a thin patch of woods on the other. It was the kind of road where time stretched out, where the drive felt longer than it was because there was nothing to look at but broken fences and overgrown ditches. Still, it was quiet, and that was good enough for me. But just a few minutes in, I noticed something unusual in my side mirror. A pair of headlights, closer than they should have been. At first, I didn't think much of it. Cars end up behind you all the time, especially at night when there's only one main road out of town. I figured it was just someone heading in the same direction. But after a few minutes, I glanced back again and felt a small knot form in my stomach. The car, some kind of dull blue sedan, was still there, hugging too close to the rear of the van. Not tailgating exactly, but close enough that their headlights were bleaching out my mirrors. I tapped the brakes lightly, hoping they'd back off a little. They didn't. I changed lanes just to see what they'd do. A second later, they followed. Still no turn signal, still no change in distance. That was when the unease really kicked in. I wasn't scared yet, just alert. I checked the time, 11:08 p.m., and kept my eyes on the road. A few blocks later, I made a right onto a smaller street, something I didn't normally take on deliveries. The sedan followed again, tight behind me. I told myself it could be nothing. Maybe they were lost. Maybe they were heading to the same town. Maybe I was just tired, but my hands had started to sweat against the steering wheel. I adjusted the mirror again, trying to catch a glimpse of the driver. Nothing, just the glare of headlights. No shape, no movement. Another turn, another mirror of my actions. I reached over to the passenger seat, searching for my phone, planning to call the warehouse, or maybe even the cops. My fingers scraped across empty upholstery. The phone wasn't there. It must have slid during a turn. I leaned down, eyes darting between the road and the dark space below the seat. Still nothing. When I looked up again, my heart jumped. The sedan had crept even closer, so close now that I could barely see the hood. I sped up a little, hoping to create space, but the car kept up without effort, matching me move for move. There were no other cars, no open stores, just me and the blue sedan in a pocket of darkness that felt too quiet, too empty, and suddenly far from anything familiar. I spotted a red stop sign up ahead and decided to take a sharp right down a road I knew would loop back toward the main highway. It was darker there, even less maintained. But if this person was just following by coincidence, maybe they'd keep going straight. I slowed, turned, and glanced in the mirror, holding my breath. The sedan followed. That's when fear started to dig in. I pressed the gas a little harder and made another quick turn. Now heading into a part of town I rarely visited: empty lots, old storage units, industrial buildings closed for the night. Still no other cars. Still no signal on my phone. The sedan never dropped back, never sped up. It just held its place behind me like it was attached by an invisible tether. Then the road curved, and for a second I lost them behind a bend. I took the opportunity and veered off into a narrow side lot next to an abandoned building. I killed the lights and waited, engine humming quietly. A full minute passed, then another. I started to think I had lost them. Then their headlights appeared at the end of the street, slow and deliberate, sweeping side to side like they were searching. They passed once, then came back. Slower this time. My heart was hammering in my chest. I held my breath as the car paused in the middle of the road, not 20 feet from where I sat, hidden in the shadows. A door opened. A man stepped out, mid-30s maybe. Baseball cap pulled low. Thin build. He didn't look around, didn't say anything. He just walked slowly toward the front of my van. I reached down again, desperate for my phone. Still nothing. My only option was to drive. I threw the van into reverse tires, screeching as I backed up too hard. The man froze in place for a second, then sprinted back toward his car. I didn't wait to see what he was doing. I floored it and tore out of that lot like something was chasing me. Because something was. I blew through a stop sign, tires howling as the van jolted over a dip in the road. My heart was racing too fast to think clearly, but I knew I couldn't head home. I needed somewhere public, somewhere lit, anywhere with people. I aimed for the nearest gas station I could remember, about 6 minutes away if I pushed the van. In the mirror, the sedan appeared again, headlights flaring to life as it turned out of the side lot and followed. They were gaining now, fast. I weaved through side streets, trying to throw them off, but they matched every move. My foot stayed on the gas, sweat running down my back as I gripped the wheel harder than I ever had. I took another turn too hard this time and felt the weight in the back of the van shift violently. Something metal clanged against the wall and the whole frame shuddered, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Every turn felt slower, every block longer. Then I saw them again, more than one now. A second vehicle had joined. Black SUV, no plates, no lights. It slipped in behind the sedan, both of them lining up like they'd done this before, like it was rehearsed. They bumped me. Not hard, but enough to feel it, a deliberate nudge from behind, followed by another. I shouted, slammed the van into the next gear, and flew down the road. I could hear them now, tires screeching, engines roaring behind me. One of them pulled alongside, windows dark, trying to box me in. I swerved, nearly lost control, and managed to push past. My hands were slick with sweat. The gas station was close. I could see its blue and white sign glowing faintly in the distance. I hit the horn, hoping someone would hear, hoping someone would see. The SUV tried again, swerving toward me, but I stayed ahead. I tore into the station's lot too fast, nearly clipping the pump island, and slammed the brakes. The van rocked to a stop, but they didn't follow me in. They just slowed on the road, paused for a beat long enough for me to see their silhouettes, and then turned off their lights and disappeared back into the dark. I stayed in the van, frozen hands still gripping the wheel long after the taillights vanished. My chest rose and fell in short, jagged breaths. The gas station was empty. No cars at the pumps. Store lights still on, but no clerk at the counter. I debated going inside, calling the police, but something told me not to move yet. Not until I knew they were really gone. After a few minutes, I finally stepped out, legs shaking, knees weak. The cold air hit me like a slap. I stumbled inside, found the clerk coming back from the bathroom. I asked if I could use the phone. He nodded slowly, probably sensing the panic on my face. I called 911, tried to explain what had happened, gave them every detail I could remember, make, color, no plates, the bump, the chase. The dispatcher took the report and said they'd send someone out to take a statement. While I waited, I went back to the van to grab my ID and noticed something strange. The rear doors were unlocked. I never opened them. I always made sure they were shut tight after every delivery. My heart sank as I walked around to the back. The latch was slightly ajar. I pulled it open slowly, expecting to see maybe the cargo had just shifted. Maybe the bump knocked something loose. But what I found made my blood run cold. A small black device the size of a paperback book was lodged between two crates wedged tightly in, a spot I would have noticed during loading. It had a blinking green light and no label. I pulled it out and turned it over. It looked military or medical or something else I didn't understand. I didn't touch the blinking part, just set it down and backed away. When the officer arrived 20 minutes later, I explained everything. He looked at the device, called it in, and then told me to stay put. When he returned, he said something I'll never forget. This isn't the first report we've had this week. Another driver found the same kind of thing. What is it? I asked. He didn't answer directly. He just said it wasn't meant to track cargo. It was meant to track you. The police kept the device. Said it would go to some regional task force, whatever that meant. They took my statement, asked if I'd noticed anyone following me in the days prior. Anyone hanging around the warehouse, anything unusual. I didn't have much to give them. Just that blue sedan, just the SUV. Just a sense that something about the whole night had been choreographed. Not random, not impulsive. Planned. I called off the rest of my shift and drove home as soon as they cleared me. I took a longer route, doubling back twice to make sure I wasn't being followed. Every headlight in my mirror made my stomach tighten. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat in the van for 10 minutes before I could make myself go inside. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep much the week after. The next morning, I checked my van again. Nothing out of place. No new scratches, no signs of forced entry. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been inside, close, quiet, careful. I asked the warehouse manager to review the security footage. He agreed. But when I checked back a few days later, he said the system had glitched. No footage saved from that night. A week later, I got an anonymous text. No name, no number. Just a message, you drive well under pressure? Most don't. I showed it to the police. They told me it was probably a prank, that these things happen when word gets around. But I knew better. I changed routes. I requested day shifts. I never drive alone at night anymore, not if I can help it. And when I do, I check every mirror, every time. I check under the van. I check the back doors twice. And I never leave my phone unsecured again. Sometimes, though, when I pull out of a lot late in the evening, I still see it. That dull blue sedan, parked just far enough away not to be obvious, just close enough to remind me. They weren't after the van. They were after me. Story 4. Midnight Driver's Ed. I didn't learn to drive until I was almost 18. Most of my friends had been behind the wheel since 16, some even earlier, bragging about speeding tickets and late-night road trips like they were badges of honor. But for me, driving always felt like something that could wait. I didn't have a car, and I lived close enough to school to bike or walk. Besides, I wasn't in a hurry to get anywhere. My mom finally pushed me to sign up for driving school the summer before senior year. You're not going to be riding your bike to job interviews, she told me while filling out the forms herself. So I signed up with a small local place called Baker's Driving School. It was run by this guy named Jeremy West, early 30s. Messy, dark blonde hair, short beard. Always wearing a hoodie, no matter the weather. He was easy to talk to, the kind of guy who made awkward silences less awkward. The lessons were simple enough. We scheduled 3 sessions, 2 afternoon drives, and 1 final evening session to practice night, driving, and low-light parking. The first 2 sessions went well. We stayed in quiet neighborhoods and on slow streets. Jeremy gave calm, measured instructions, never raised his voice, and always cracked a joke if I got too tense behind the wheel. By the end of the second session, I was feeling confident, maybe even a little excited for the final drive. That last lesson was set for a Friday night in late August. It was hot during the day, but by the time we met around 7:15, the sun had started to dip and the air felt a little cooler. We planned to drive through a nearby industrial park and then head to a spot Jeremy knew with empty lots where I could practice parallel parking. As I pulled into the school's lot that evening, I remember him leaning against the passenger door, sipping coffee and smiling like he had no worries in the world. "Ready for your night shift?" he asked as I got in. "Let's see if I survive it," I joked back. Turns out that was the last time I laughed that night. We started the drive just before sunset, cruising through quiet neighborhoods where porch lights flickered on one by one. Jeremy kept the mood light, pointing out random trivia like which houses had been foreclosed or where some former student had once backed into a mailbox. I laughed along, trying to stay focused as the sky dimmed and shadows stretched across the road. After about 30 minutes, we turned onto a stretch of highway that led toward the industrial park he mentioned. The area wasn't totally unfamiliar. I had passed it with my mom once or twice, but I'd never driven through it myself. Once we exited the main road, everything felt different. The buildings were massive and spaced out, most of them dark and silent with cracked parking lots and fences lined with barbed wire. There were no streetlights on this side, just our headlights cutting a narrow path through the gloom. Jeremy had me take a few turns, practicing stops at empty intersections and wide turns through the deserted lanes. At some point I realized I hadn't seen another car in at least 10 minutes. No traffic, no pedestrians, just us in a maze of hollow buildings. I mentioned it, half joking. "Quiet out here," I said. Jeremy didn't answer right away. He was staring at something on his phone, the screen lighting up his face in the dark. "Yeah," he said eventually. "That's why it's perfect." I slowed at a four-way stop with no signs of life in any direction. "Want me to turn around now, nah?" he said. "Let's keep going. There's a spot ahead, big open lot, perfect for parking drills." So I kept going, but something about his tone had changed. Less relaxed, more focused. I glanced at him once or twice, but he wasn't smiling anymore. His phone stayed in his hand, but he wasn't using it, just gripping it tight, watching the road. We passed a chain-link gate that had been pulled halfway open. Beyond it, a huge warehouse loomed in the dark. Jeremy pointed. "In there," he said. I pulled in slowly, tires crunching over broken glass. And as the headlights swept across the lot, I saw the first thing that made my stomach turn. A parked car, still running, but no one inside. I eased the car to a stop, my eyes locked on the running vehicle parked near the far edge of the lot. Its headlights were off, but the engine was definitely on. I could hear the low hum and see the faint exhaust curling into the night air. No movement inside, no one nearby. Just the slow churn of an idling machine in a place that should have been completely empty. Jeremy leaned forward, squinting. "That wasn't here last time," he said quietly, almost to himself. Then louder, "It's fine. Probably someone resting or lost. Don't worry about it." But I was already worried. My hands felt stiff on the wheel. "Do you want me to leave?" "No," he said quickly. "Pull forward a bit. I'll guide you into a parking spot. I want to test your angles." Something about his voice had changed again. Flat, clipped, like he was reading from a script. I put the car in drive but didn't move. "Jeremy, this is weird." He gave a tight smile. "I know, but this is the best place to get used to night driving. Trust me." I didn't. The air felt wrong, too still, too silent. My gut screamed to get out. And then the parked car's driver's side door opened. Slowly, deliberately, a man stepped out. He didn't rush, didn't shout. He just stood there staring at us from across the lot. Tall, thin, wearing something dark that made him hard to make out. But I could see his head tilt slightly like he was studying us. Jeremy shifted in his seat. "We should go," I said, my voice low. "Wait," Jeremy replied, his hand suddenly on the steering wheel. I jerked back. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer. The man across the lot started walking toward us. Not fast, not threatening, but with purpose. I hit the gas. Jeremy tried to stop me, but I swerved, jerking the car away from him and out of the lot as fast as I could manage. I didn't look back until we hit the main road. And when I did, Jeremy was gone. His door was wide open, and his seat was empty. I didn't stop driving. My hands trembled on the wheel, but I kept going, street after street, turn after turn, until I was sure I was nowhere near that warehouse. The whole time, Jeremy's empty seat stayed beside me, like some awful reminder that I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't dreamed up that man stepping from the car. I hadn't made up Jeremy vanishing in the space of a single turn. I finally pulled into a brightly lit strip mall parking lot and slammed the car into park. For a minute, I just sat there trying to catch my breath, glancing around to see if anyone had followed. But there was no sign of the dark car, no trace of Jeremy. I reached for my phone and called my mom, hands shaking, as I explained what happened. She told me to stay put. She was calling the cops. 15 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. I told them everything about the driving school, about the warehouse, about the man who stepped out of the car. One officer stayed with me while the other ran a check on the instructor. When he returned, his expression was stiff. "We're not seeing a license for any Jeremy West registered under Baker's driving school," he said carefully. "You said that's who trained you?" "Yes," I said. He signed the forms. "His name's on the paperwork." The officer nodded slowly. "We'll need to see that paperwork." I showed them a copy on my phone. But when they took a closer look, their expressions darkened. The file looked official at first glance, but the contact number for the driving school was disconnected. The address listed for the office was a burned-out strip next to the highway condemned a year ago, after a fire. And then the real twist hit. Baker's driving school had shut down 18 months earlier. There were no active instructors, no registered vehicles, no lessons scheduled. So whoever Jeremy was, and wherever he'd taken me that night, he hadn't been assigned to teach anyone, and I had no idea how he got my name. The officers kept asking questions, their voices calm but increasingly careful, like they were talking to someone who might be confused or unstable. I don't blame them. The story I was telling sounded impossible even to me. A fake instructor with real documents. A ghost driving school that hadn't existed for over a year, and a disappearance that left no trace behind. One officer offered to drive me home while the other stayed with the vehicle. I agreed. As we pulled out of the lot, I looked back at the car and felt a tightness in my chest. I hadn't noticed it before. But the dashboard cam, something required by the school, was still recording. I hadn't thought to check it until that moment. I told the officer about it. They sent someone from tech the next day to retrieve the footage. I wasn't prepared for what they found. The video showed the entire lesson. Jeremy climbing into the car, us driving through the neighborhoods, the jokes, the warehouse, even the car in the lot with the running engine. But then something changed. Right after the man stepped out of the dark car, the camera glitched. For 6 full seconds, the screen went black. When the footage returned, Jeremy's seat was already empty. And here's the part that made the room go silent. The passenger door had never opened. No one left the vehicle. Jeremy didn't get out. He didn't even shift. One frame he was there. The next he was gone. But even more disturbing was the final frame the camera captured before it shut off completely. It showed my hands on the steering wheel as I fled the warehouse lot, but just barely visible in the dark behind the backseat window was a reflection. Not of me, not of Jeremy, but of that same man from the parked car, his face pressed against the rear glass, watching me drive away. The image was clear, too clear. And yet the van had been empty. I was sure of it. At least I thought I was. After the footage came out, the police kept the car for further inspection, but I knew they wouldn't find anything. No fingerprints, no license match on Jeremy West. Nothing about that man in the lot. Just gaps. Gaps where people should be. Gaps where answers never showed up. And as much as they tried to explain things rationally, identity fraud, an elaborate prank, maybe even a hallucination brought on by stress, I knew what I saw. I knew what I didn't imagine. I dropped out of driving school completely after that. My mom didn't argue. In fact, she drove me to every appointment for the next 3 months without complaint. But something changed in her too. I caught her checking the rearview mirror too often, locking the doors even when we were already moving. She never said it out loud, but I think she believed me because the fear in her eyes was real. 1 week after the incident, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a list of names. All students, all from local schools. Next to each name was a red X, except for mine. Next to my name was a simple line. Passed. No signature, No explanation. I turned it into the authorities. They didn't trace it, but it wasn't the last time I heard from him. Sometimes late at night I get calls from numbers I don't recognize. They never leave voicemails. When I answer, there's only silence or the faint hum of a car engine idling. Once I thought I saw him again. Not Jeremy. The man from the lot, standing at the edge of a grocery store parking lot barely lit by a flickering lamppost. Just standing, watching. I blinked and he was gone. I haven't gotten behind the wheel since, because I realized something after that night. Driving school wasn't about learning the road. It was about seeing who makes it back. And someone out there is still keeping score. Story 5. Backseat passenger. I had just started working as a rideshare driver. Nothing permanent, just a side hustle to help cover rent while I figured out what to do with my life. I drove mostly at night. The pay was a little better and the roads were less crowded. I liked the solitude, the quiet, the way the city looked under streetlights. You get used to strange passengers, weird conversations, awkward silences. Most of the time it's just drunk college kids, tired workers, or couples who don't speak to each other at all. The app worked simply enough. Pickups, drop-offs, tips. No human contact unless absolutely necessary. That was ideal for someone like me. I kept my head down, drove the route, and kept the car clean. The only rule I followed strictly: no extra stops, no off-app payments, and never accept a ride that isn't confirmed through the platform. That rule saved me more than once. It was a Thursday night, maybe around 11:30, when I got a ping for a pickup in an older part of town, a stretch of narrow streets lined with outdated apartment buildings and empty storefronts. The profile had no picture, just a name, M. No rating. New account. That wasn't unusual, though. Plenty of people use the app for the first time every day. When I pulled up to the address, the building looked half abandoned. One light on in the hallway, rust on the gate. No one waiting outside. I double-checked the address. Still matched. I waited a few seconds, engine idling, fingers tapping the steering wheel. I was about to cancel when the rear door suddenly opened. A woman got in. Mid-30s maybe. Pale skin, dark hair, pulled back tight black coat that looked too heavy for the weather. She didn't say a word. Just looked straight ahead and fastened her seatbelt. "Hi," I said. No response. I asked, headed to Chapel Avenue, right? She nodded barely. I marked the ride as started and pulled away. It was quiet for a while. Too quiet. And then I noticed something strange in the mirror. She wasn't showing up in the reflection. At first, I thought it was just the angle. The rearview mirror can play tricks when it's dark and you're tired. I adjusted it slightly, just enough to catch the full back seat. Still nothing. The headrest was there, the seatbelt strap clear across the leather, but the woman, gone. I glanced back quickly just for a second, and she was still sitting there. Eyes forward, hands folded neatly in her lap, face expressionless. I looked again at the mirror. Still nothing. My chest tightened. Maybe there was a glare, or maybe the window tint was playing tricks with the interior light. I reached up and switched the dome light on just to test it. The car filled with a soft yellow glow. And the back seat in the mirror, still empty. I flicked the light off immediately. I didn't want to freak myself out. Not while I was still driving, not with someone or something sitting silently 3 feet behind me. I told myself it had to be something technical, some bizarre reflection issue. I kept my eyes on the road, hands firm on the wheel, and tried to focus on the destination, Chapel Avenue. 15 minutes away, mostly through quiet residential roads and wooded stretches. About 5 minutes into the drive, she finally spoke. "You take this route often?" Her voice was soft, almost careful, like it hadn't been used in a while. "Sometimes," I said, trying to sound casual. "Not a lot of pickups out this way." She didn't reply. The silence returned, but heavier now, more aware. I kept checking the mirror without meaning to, hoping to see even a blur of her outline. But there was nothing. Just the headrest, just the empty seat. I turned onto a darker stretch of road flanked by tall trees and no streetlights. My headlights barely cut through the dense black ahead. And then she spoke again, quieter this time. They only show up if you see them. What reflections, she said. I swallowed hard. Sometimes, she continued, seeing them makes them real. Her words hung in the air like fog, thick and clinging. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to acknowledge them. I just kept driving, staring ahead like the road might offer some kind of explanation. She fell silent again, but now every part of me was on edge. I couldn't stop checking the mirror, even though it showed nothing but the empty seat behind me. 10 more minutes to Chapel Avenue. I reached over and turned the radio on something low and easy just to fill the space. A soft piano instrumental came through the speakers, but after only a few seconds, the signal crackled and cut out. Static hissed from the speakers, then silence. The dashboard screen flickered. Then I heard it, breathing, but not from me. Slow, steady, too close. I gripped the steering wheel tighter and looked up. Still no reflection. I flicked my eyes to the passenger side mirror and caught something just at the edge. A pale hand, resting lightly on the back seat, fingers thin and motionless. I turned slightly, not fully, just enough to glance over my shoulder. She was staring at me, not at the road, not out the window, just at me. Her head tilted slightly, lips parted like she was waiting for me to say something. I looked forward again, throat dry, heart pounding in my ears. The road curved ahead, but it felt like I was trapped in a loop. Same trees, same shadows, same feeling of being watched from behind. Then she whispered something I didn't quite catch. I asked without turning, "What did you say?" She leaned closer. I heard the seat creak, felt the faintest shift in the air. "Chapel Avenue isn't where I'm going," she said. I didn't respond. I couldn't. She leaned back, and then for the first time, I saw her in the mirror. But her face wasn't the one that had entered the car. It was older, sunken with dark hollows where her eyes should have been. And she was smiling. The moment I saw her reflection in the mirror, distorted, decaying, impossibly wrong, my hands jerked on the wheel. The car swerved slightly, tires brushing the edge of the shoulder before I corrected. I didn't speak. I didn't look back. I just kept driving, forcing my eyes to stay on the road. But the atmosphere inside the car had changed. Heavier. The temperature dropped. My breath fogged slightly on the windshield. She hadn't spoken again, but I could hear the soft rustle of her coat. Or maybe it wasn't the coat. Maybe it was her skin. Something dry, something that sounded like paper being torn very slowly. I tried to stay calm, tried to focus on Chapel Avenue, though by now I wasn't even sure if I was heading in the right direction. The GPS had stopped tracking. The screen was frozen, the map stuck on the stretch of road we'd passed 20 minutes ago. I tapped it once, nothing. The radio was dead. The air vents had gone silent. And then, without warning, the headlights dimmed. Not off, just weaker. The trees outside seemed darker now, as if they leaned closer to the road, as if they were watching too. I stole a glance at the mirror again. Her smile was gone, but now she was closer, leaning forward, her face near the headrest, her reflection clear but impossibly still. Eyes black, an endless face twisted in something colder than anger. I clenched my jaw. "Where are you going?" Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then she raised one hand and slowly pointed ahead. At first I didn't see it, but as the car crested a small hill, the trees opened onto a clearing lit by a flickering, pale orange street lamp. A chapel. Old, crumbling, half swallowed by vines. It hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. But now it sat in the clearing like it had always belonged. And on the sign out front, barely legible under the dirt and moss, were 2 words, "No exit." She lowered her hand and whispered, "Almost home." I slammed the brakes. The car skidded slightly on the loose gravel of the clearing, headlights casting long shadows across the overgrown chapel and the crumbling path that led to its rotting door. I stared at it, heart-thundering, sweat running cold down my back. The building looked ancient, untouched, yet somehow waiting. Behind me, silence. I turned slowly, too slowly, and the back seat was empty. The door hadn't opened. There was no sound of it closing. But she was gone. Except she wasn't, because her reflection was still in the mirror, staring directly into mine. And then something shifted. The air thickened like I had passed through some invisible curtain. The dashboard lights blinked out. My hand, still gripping the wheel, felt numb. A low humming sound began like static or electricity buzzing inside my ears. My head spun. I looked outside again. The chapel was gone. The trees were gone. So was the road. In every direction, just open fields under a sky that looked too large, too wrong. The stars above were faint, flickering like dying embers, and none of them looked familiar. There were no landmarks, no signs. Just me, the car, and a horizon that curved inward like the edge of a glass bowl. And then the GPS came back to life. Only it wasn't showing a route. It showed a message. Ride in progress, 1 passenger remaining. My chest tightened. I wasn't alone. I looked to the passenger seat. She was there now. Same pale skin, same black coat. But her eyes weren't just empty. They were bleeding black down her cheeks like ink. Her lips moved without sound, and her fingers tapped the dashboard gently, rhythmically, like ticking. Then the GPS beeped again. Destination approaching. I stared at the screen as a single word appeared in place of the address. Remember. I turned to her again, but the seat was empty. And in the mirror, I was sitting in the back seat, watching myself drive. I don't remember pulling over. I don't remember stopping the engine. But when I opened my eyes, it was morning. The car was parked on the shoulder of a back road I didn't recognize, surrounded by forest. No chapel, no empty fields, no passenger. My phone was dead. The dashboard screen frozen on the rideshare app's logo, still flashing the words, Ride in progress. I shut it down and restarted the car, hoping everything I'd seen was just a stress dream, a waking hallucination from too many night shifts and too little sleep. But the trip log told a different story. The app had recorded a ride, logged at 11:37 p.m., pickup location of the abandoned apartment building on Graham Street. Drop-off, no exit road, distance unknown, duration 6 hours and 17 minutes. Fare $0. I stared at it, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe someone hacked the system. But I knew better. Because when I checked the in-car camera, something I rarely bothered to use, the entire drive had been wiped. Every file, every timestamp. Gone. Only one file remained. 10 seconds long. Just static at first. Then at the 9-second mark, a frame flickered through a face pressed to the glass from inside the car. Pale, hollow-eyed, smiling, watching. I deleted the app that day, stopped driving altogether. But the thing is, the rides don't always need the app. They find you anyway. 2 weeks later, I got into my own car just to run an errand. And the moment I sat down, the dashboard blinked to life on its own. The same interface, the same pulsing message. Passenger en route. I haven't driven since. Sometimes I wake up and my car is unlocked. Sometimes the seatbelt in the back is buckled. Once I found a black coat lying across the seat, cold and damp like it had just been worn. And sometimes, when I walk past reflective windows late at night, I swear I see myself sitting in the back seat, waiting, seat. Story 6. Figure in the fog. The fog was already thick when I left the gas station. I had another hour to go before I reached the motel, a cheap roadside spot just outside a town I had never heard of. I was on my way back from a family visit 3 states over, trying to make decent time on a weeknight stretch of back roads and forgotten highways. I didn't mind driving at night. In fact, I preferred it. The roads were quiet. There was no traffic. Just me, the hum of the engine, and the low glow of the dashboard. That night, the fog wasn't just normal fog. It clung to the road like it had weight. It swirled low across the asphalt in thick layers, and my headlights couldn't cut more than 10 feet ahead. Every tree along the shoulder looked like a person. Every road sign came out of nowhere like a ghost. Still, I kept going. I had taken this route once before, and it was mostly straight, just long stretches of pine forests and the occasional run-down truck. Stop. My only goal was to get to the motel, sleep a few hours, and head out before dawn. I didn't see another car for nearly 40 minutes. Not one pair of headlights. Not one set of taillights. Just silence and fog. I played the radio low, but even the stations were going in and out, picking up strange static or garbled voices that sounded like they were coming from 100 miles underground. I turned it off and rolled the window down slightly, hoping the fresh air would keep me alert. That was when I saw the figure. At first I thought it was a mailbox, just a dark shape at the edge of the fog. But as I got closer, I realized it was standing. Still, facing the road. It didn't move. It didn't wave. It just stood there, barely visible, swallowed halfway by the fog. And then I passed it. But something in me said that wasn't the last time I would see it. Not tonight. I kept driving, but something had shifted. The fog thickened until it looked like smoke drifting in from a fire I couldn't see. I slowed down, watching the painted lines vanish beneath the haze, as if the road itself was being erased in front of me. My GPS had stopped updating 5 minutes earlier, just froze in place. I tapped the screen, but it didn't respond. No signal, no directions. Just the little blue arrow trapped and circling in the middle of nowhere. I didn't panic. Not yet. I'd always prided myself on keeping calm during long drives, especially in rural areas like this. I figured I'd pull over at the next rest stop or clearing to reset the GPS and get my bearings. But mile after mile went by, and I saw nothing. No gas stations, no exits, no homes. Not even those old flickering road lamps you'd expect in a stretch like this. The road just kept stretching out endlessly in both directions. I looked at the clock. It was 12:03 a.m. Then I looked again a little while later. Still 12:03. I thought maybe the dash was stuck too. But my phone said the same thing. I hadn't made a single turn since leaving the gas station, and yet I felt like I'd somehow gotten lost. Like I had driven too far into a place not meant for travelers. Then I saw the figure again, standing just beyond the shoulder exactly like before. Only this time, I hadn't passed any turns. There was no way someone could have gotten ahead of me. I slowed down almost to a crawl, trying to get a better look. They were tall, thin, draped in something dark and heavy. Their head was tilted slightly, like they were listening for something or watching. I drove past them again, and again they didn't move. But now I was sure of one thing. They had turned to face me, and their hands were no longer at their sides. The third time I saw the figure, I hit the brakes. Hard. The tires screeched against the damp pavement, and the car slid a few feet before coming to a stop. I sat there, breathing, heavy knuckles white on the steering wheel. My headlights caught them perfectly this time, centered, illuminated in the swirling mist. A person, but not quite. The figure didn't flinch under the glare, didn't raise a hand to shield its face. It just stood motionless in the middle of the road, not 5 feet ahead. I couldn't make out any details. No face, no eye. Just the vague impression of a hood or cowl hanging low, shadowing whatever features were beneath. It looked old somehow, like the shape of it didn't quite fit the outline of a human body anymore. I blinked once. They were gone. Gone like they had never been there at all. No sound, no movement, just nothing. But I knew I hadn't imagined it. The condensation on my windshield swirled where something had stood, and the road ahead looked darker now, like the figure had left something behind. I started to inch forward, slow, cautious. The fog grew thicker again, too thick for my high beams. So I switched them off and drove with only the low glow of my regular lights. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. A minute later, my headlights caught movement. Not ahead. To the side. The figure was walking now, just beyond the ditch line, keeping pace with the car. Still facing forward, still never turning their head. But moving. Gliding. As if the fog itself was carrying them. I picked up speed. They matched it. No matter how fast I went, they stayed just outside the beams. Always walking, always watching. until the road ahead vanished completely into white. And my car stalled, just like that. Dead in the fog, engine's silent headlights flickering. And when I looked to my left, the figure was standing right outside my window. I froze. The figure stood no more than a foot from the driver's side window, unmoving, face hidden beneath the thick fog in the shadow of its hood. I couldn't see eyes or a mouth, just darkness, like staring into a hole cut in reality. My first instinct was to lock the doors, but when I reached for the button, I saw it was already engaged. The whole car was locked, all of it. I hadn't done that. The fog outside pressed in thicker, clinging to the windows, muting every shape beyond the glass. I couldn't see the trees anymore, or the road, or even the hood of the car. Just that figure, standing there, still, waiting. Then it moved. Not much, just a slight tilt forward, as if leaning in to look at me more closely. I turned away, not wanting to meet whatever was under that hood. I fumbled for the ignition, trying to restart the car. The engine clicked. Then again. No turnover, no spark. Just a grinding hum, as if something were inside the engine, holding it still. I dared to glance back at the window. The figure was gone. But before I could process relief, there came a noise. A slow, deliberate tapping. Not from the driver's side, from the back. Tap, tap, tap. 3 times against the rear window glass. I turned my head slowly, every nerve in my body pulled tight. There was a hand pressed flat against the back windshield, pale thin with impossibly long fingers outlined against the fog-smeared glass. I couldn't breathe. Then the hand slid upward, vanishing into the mist above. Another tap came, this time from the passenger side. Then the roof, then the front hood. One after another, like something circling, testing the car. The fog outside the windshield began to move, not drift, but shift. Like it had weight, like it was alive. And out of that pulsing white, the figure stepped forward again. But this time, it wasn't alone. There were more of them now. Dozens, maybe more, emerging from the fog, like shadows peeling away from the air itself. All shaped like the first tall, cloaked, faceless. They moved silently, surrounding the car, in a slow, deliberate circle. Their forms barely distinguishable from the swirling mist. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't run, couldn't drive, couldn't even scream. Just sit there gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, waiting for something, anything to make sense. Then my radio crackled to life. Not music, not static. A voice, my voice, repeating the last words I had spoken aloud. I can't breathe, in a flat mechanical tone. Again and again. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I slammed the volume knob, but it wouldn't shut off. The headlights flickered. The dashboard lights pulsed. And then the temperature dropped so suddenly I could see my breath fogging the air inside the car. And that was when I saw something even more terrifying than the figures. In the fog reflected faintly in the windshield, I could see the back seat. Someone was sitting there. Not one of them. Not cloaked. It was me. I was in the driver's seat, but also in the back. Same clothes, same expression, same frozen panic. My reflection blinked, but I hadn't. I spun around, heart nearly stopping, but the back seat was empty. Empty. Until I blinked again and saw my hands on the steering wheel. From behind. I wasn't in the front seat anymore. I was watching myself drive. Only the version of me in the driver's seat wasn't panicking. He looked calm, empty, like he had accepted something I hadn't. Then he looked into the mirror and smiled, and the figures outside began to close in. When I woke up, it was morning. The fog was gone and the sun was rising behind the trees. My car sat perfectly aligned on the shoulder of a familiar road, about 3 miles from the motel I had booked the night before. The engine was off the doors, still locked, and there was no sign of damage or intrusion, just silence and that dry, metallic taste in my mouth that made me feel like I hadn't spoken in hours. At first, I convinced myself it had been a dream, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and stress. But then I noticed the strange detail: my seat was pushed back farther than I ever adjusted it. and the rearview mirror was tilted too high-pointed squarely at the back seat. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no GPS history. But there was one file saved in my voice memos. I didn't remember recording anything. It was only 6 seconds long. I pressed play. It was breathing. Slow rhythmic, not mine. Followed by a whisper, still watching. I deleted the file and tossed the phone into the glove compartment. I made it to the motel and slept with all the lights on the curtains open and a chair pushed against the door. I didn't even get under the covers. Just stared at the ceiling until sleep finally dragged me under. That was 2 months ago. I've driven that road twice since, during the day. Clear skies, no fog. But every time I pass the stretch near the old pine forest, my radio cuts out. The clock on the dash flickers, and for a split second, the rearview mirror catches something that shouldn't be there. A shadow in the back seat, a shape in the fog. I've tried replacing the mirror, getting the car detailed, even trading out the stereo. Nothing helps. And sometimes when it's very quiet and the roads are very empty, I'll glance at the mirror and see him, the other me, still driving, still smiling, like he never left that night at all. Story 7, Earl from the Roadside. When I first started working nights at the gas station off Route 12, I was just happy to have a job. It wasn't glamorous, but it was quiet, steady, and far enough from town that most of the weirdos stayed away. Most nights passed in silence. An occasional trucker would roll in, sometimes a local, on their way to or from the next county. I stocked shelves, cleaned the coffee machine, and listened to the hum of the coolers. After midnight, it felt like the whole world had gone to sleep, except for me and the highway. Then Earl showed up. He came in around 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. I remember because I was halfway through sweeping aisle 4 when I heard the old bell above the door creak. Not ring, creak, like it had weight. I turned around. There he was, tall, thin, wearing a dusty green army jacket. Jeans so faded they looked gray, and boots that left wet prints on the tile, even though it hadn't rained in days. He nodded at me slow and made his way down the snacks aisle. He didn't speak, didn't make a sound as he moved, just walked like he already knew where everything was. I watched him pick up a can of chili, inspect it, and then place it gently into a plastic basket he must have grabbed from outside. After a few more items, crackers, a bottle of water, batteries, he walked to the counter and set them down. "You open late?" he said, voice rough like gravel. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep things light. "Graveyard shift. You heading somewhere?" He just looked at me for a second. "Then back home." I nodded awkwardly and rang him up. He paid in exact change coins that looked older than me and took his bag without another word. Before he left, he paused by the door and added, "Thanks for staying open. Makes things easier." I didn't think much of it at the time. But then he came back the next night, and the next. Always at 2 a.m., always the same items, always Earl. Earl kept coming every night for over a week. Same time, same order, same quiet nod at the door, the same slow, heavy footsteps through the aisles. I started expecting him timing my shelf stocking so I'd be behind the register by 1:55. He never said more than a few words, but there was something about him that stuck in your mind. Something still. Like he didn't breathe unless he had to. Like the air around him slowed down. One night, I tried to be friendly. Asked if he was from around here. "Used to be," he said, placing the can of chili gently on the counter. "You move away." He looked at me, eyes pale and glassy under the buzzing fluorescent lights. "No, just stopped being seen." I chuckled awkwardly, thinking maybe he was joking, but he didn't smile. He didn't blink either. That night, after he left, I watched him from the window. He walked across the empty lot past the flickering gas pumps and into the tree line behind the station. No car, no bike, just vanished between the trees like the dark swallowed him up. The next night, I was ready. I got to work early and parked around the back so he wouldn't see me watching from outside. When he showed up right on time, I waited until he went in, then crept out to see where he came from. But there were no tracks in the gravel. No headlights, nothing. Just Earl standing in aisle 4, picking up the can of chili like he always did. The lot behind the store was empty, and when I checked the security footage later, I felt my skin go cold. At 2:00 a.m., the door creaked open. The bell didn't ring. The footage showed the door moving, but nobody came in. A few seconds later, items began lifting off the shelves and placing themselves in the basket, one by one. The register beeped, the drawer opened, and the money inside shifted like someone had just paid. But the feed stayed empty. There was never anyone on camera. Not even Earl. I tried to explain it away. Glitches in the camera feed. Maybe bad wiring in the lights, or a prank pulled by someone who knew the blind spots. But none of that made sense. The register didn't open by itself. The drawer didn't close after spitting out exact change, and I hadn't imagined Earl. I talked to him, heard him, watched him walk across the tiles. I could still picture the scuffed boots and the way his coat never seemed to catch the light, like it absorbed it instead. Still, I told myself it was nothing, until the night I spoke his name. It was just after 1:45. No customers, no cars, just the usual stillness. I stood behind the counter, staring at the empty parking lot, and muttered under my breath, "Earl's late." The air in the room shifted. The hum of the coolers cut out for a second. Lights overhead flickered not fast, but slow, like something heavy had passed above them. Then came the creak. The door opened. No bell, no footsteps. But the smell hit me first, like old wet earth and rusted metal, like a place long buried and only recently disturbed. I leaned over the counter, heart thumping, expecting to see him. The store looked empty, but the floor tiles behind the snack aisle were wet. Boot prints leading down toward aisle 4, and when I called out Earl, the register drawer opened, all on its own. Slow, deliberate. The screen lit up, transaction complete. I stepped out from behind the counter, every nerve screaming for me not to, but I had to see. I had to know. When I turned the corner into aisle 4, the can of chili was gone. So were the batteries. So was the water. The basket sat at the end of the row, empty. Then I heard breathing. Not mine. Not near. Behind me. I spun around. Earl was there. Not standing. Floating slightly above the floor, eyes clouded, skin gray, like newspaper left out in the rain. "Thanks," he rasped, voice dry as leaves, "for remembering me." I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the empty basket behind me. Earl hovered there, unmoving, his boots inches above the tile. His head tilted just enough to make my stomach knot. His face was pale but detailed, like a photograph washed in ash-sharp cheekbones, sunken eyes, lips cracked and barely holding shape. But his eyes, they looked straight through me, like he was remembering a version of me that had never existed. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. Just the sound of the coolers kicking back on behind me and the soft hum of the lights overhead. I blinked. He was gone. No sound, no flash, just gone. The next few nights, he didn't show up, but something had changed in the store. The clock over the register stopped ticking, stuck at 2:00 a.m. The cooler near aisle 6 ran cold enough to fog the glass, even when unplugged. And the cans of chili, no matter how many I reordered, one would always go missing by morning. I told the manager I thought someone was breaking in. But when he checked the security tapes, his face went pale. He didn't say anything, just took out the tape and slipped it into his coat pocket. He told me to take the night off. I didn't argue, but when I came back the next night, the register wouldn't turn on. The lights flickered every time I walked past aisle 4. And worst of all, someone had left a note taped to the inside of the break room door. 4 words, written in perfect block letters. "Don't forget about Earl." I asked the day staff who left it, but no one claimed it. No one even knew who I was talking about. There were no records of a customer named Earl. No sales logged at 2:00 a.m. No security footage. No proof he had ever existed, except for the basket, which sat neatly under the register, filled with a can of chili, a bottle of water, and a new pack of batteries, waiting I couldn't take it anymore. The store felt wrong every time I stepped in, like something watched from the shelves, like the lights only worked when they wanted to. I started bringing my own flashlight, kept it tucked in my hoodie pocket. But it didn't help, not really. Because Earl didn't care about the dark. What he cared about was being remembered. That realization hit me on the 8th night without him. I was restocking the cooler eyes, heavy, half ready to quit, when the register pinged on its own. I walked over slowly, already knowing what I'd see. The drawer slid open. 1 quarter, 1 dime, 3 pennies, exact change. The receipt printer began to whir, spitting out a long, curling strip of paper. I pulled it free and stared. No items, no total. Just a timestamp, 2:00 a.m., and then a second line. Still here. I tried to quit the next day. Drove to the regional office, asked to speak with the area manager. I told them everything about the glitches, the missing inventory, the figure, the surveillance footage. The woman behind the desk listened carefully, then typed something into her computer. "You're assigned to Station 12, she said slowly. "Right," I nodded. She frowned. "Station 12 burned down in 2009. My stomach dropped. No, I was just there last night. I've worked there 3 weeks. She turned the screen toward me. There it was. A news article. Old grainy photo of a burned out shell of a gas station. Roof collapsed. Charred debris. The caption read, "Local veteran dies in overnight fire at Route 12 gas station. Employee missing. Investigation closed." My name wasn't in the article, but Earl's was. Earl Thomas Hanley, Vietnam veteran, former clerk, died alone in the fire. Body found near the back office. Officials speculated he had been stocking shelves when the blaze started, and below the article, one comment. He always made time for people, even after. I left the office without a word, but when I got back in my car, there was a plastic basket on the passenger seat. Inside it, a can of chili, a bottle of water, and a new pack of batteries. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the basket. Nothing in me wanted to touch it, but I couldn't look away. The chili can label was faded, the bottle of water had no brand, and the battery pack was sealed in old-style plastic, the kind you only saw in stores a decade ago. None of it looked new, yet none of it looked aged either. Like it didn't belong to this time. I didn't go back to work. I didn't call anyone. I just drove straight home and locked the doors behind me. But it didn't stop there. The next night at 2:00 a.m. on the dot, the doorbell rang. I didn't answer. The following night, I heard the creak of a door opening. But it wasn't my front door, it was the bell from the gas station. That same heavy dragging sound echoing from nowhere. I began hearing the register ping in my sleep, waking up to coins stacked neatly on my kitchen table. Then came the receipt. It printed from my home printer. I don't even remember having it plugged in. The paper was warm when I picked it up. Same timestamp, same 2 words. Still here. That night, I dreamed I was back in the store. Everything was ash and smoke and melted plastic. The coolers were twisted open shelves, caved in the ceiling black with soot. But aisle 4 still stood, and in it, Earl placing his usual items in the basket completely unharmed, as if nothing around him had burned. He turned and said something I couldn't hear, and when I woke up, my bedroom smelled like smoke. I moved 2 towns over within the week. New job, new number, no mention of the past. But some nights, when the clock hits 2 hours, I wake up cold, and there's always a sound quiet but unmistakable. The creak of a door opening, followed by a voice I know too well. Thanks for staying open. Makes things easier. Story 8. The knock on the window. I never liked night driving, especially along the stretch of Route 19 that cuts through the marshlands. The road curves too sharply. Visibility drops fast, and in the dark, the swamp looks like it's breathing. Still, I was behind on deliveries that evening, and the GPS insisted Route 19 was the fastest way to cut across the county. I figured I'd power through it. 30 minutes of backroad silence, drop the package, be done. The drive started normal enough. Windows cracked old rock station playing just loud enough to keep me alert. The sky was overcast, no moon, but the air was cool and the pavement dry. Traffic was non-existent. Just a couple of distant tail lights far ahead that eventually vanished completely. It was the kind of quiet where the engine becomes a lullaby. Nothing but my headlights slicing through the dark and the faint rhythm of tires against broken asphalt. About 10 minutes in, I passed a small sign, half buried in overgrowth. It said wetlands ahead in peeling yellow paint. I had seen it before, mostly ignored it, like every other faded sign on this road. But this time, as I drove past, I caught a movement in my peripheral vision. Just a flicker of motion near the edge of the trees. I slowed down slightly, not sure if it was an animal or just a trick of the light. I didn't stop. I told myself it was probably a raccoon or a deer. Still, something about it sat wrong. It didn't dart away. It didn't react. It just stood there, watching. A shape just behind the tree line, far enough back that the headlights didn't quite reach. I couldn't see details, just a pale face unmoving, half turned like it had been caught mid-step. I kept driving. Didn't look again. Didn't want to. But 5 minutes later, I felt something I couldn't explain. A shift in pressure, like someone had opened a window that I knew was still shut. And I swear from the corner of my eye, I saw something reflected in the passenger window. Something that wasn't me. I didn't look directly at the passenger window. Something deep in my gut told me not to. I kept my hand steady on the wheel eyes, locked on the road ahead, pretending like everything was normal. But it wasn't. The cabin of the car felt different now, heavier. Like the air had thickened and every breath had to push through something unseen. The music from the radio had started to crackle, the guitar's solo warping in and out like a weak signal struggling to hold on. I turned the volume down, and in the silence that followed, I became aware of another sound. Breathing. Not mine. Shallow, steady. Like someone sitting beside me was trying to stay calm. I risked a quick glance. Just enough to catch the reflection again. There was definitely something in the passenger seat. Not fully visible, more of a suggestion than a figure. A faint outline in the window like steam on glass, outlining a face. It was turned slightly toward me, head low, as if watching me drive. I slammed the window button, thinking maybe it had somehow cracked open and let in the cold. But the window didn't move. It was already sealed tight. I hit the lock button just to be sure. All doors secured. All windows closed. Still the breathing continued. And now I could feel it too. The faintest warmth brushing against my arm. Like the kind of heat you feel when someone leans in too close. I turned on the interior light. The seat next to me was empty. But the reflection didn't disappear. It just shifted. Now it looked more defined, like the silhouette of a face pressed close to the glass. Features impossible to make out, but unmistakably human. I turned the light off again, heart racing. There was no turnoff for miles. No other cars. No signs of life. Just the road, the dark, and the thing watching me from the passenger side. I didn't stop driving. I didn't speak. But from that moment on, I never felt alone in that car again. The road ahead narrowed as I entered the thickest part of the wetlands. Trees pressed closer to the shoulder, their branches clawing overhead like a canopy built by something with no interest in letting the sky through. The fog rolled in low and dense, curling around my tires and swallowing the white lines. It was like driving through a tunnel made of mist. The air in the car stayed cold unnaturally, so even though I had shut off the AC and rolled the windows up tight, that breathing hadn't stopped. In fact, it sounded closer now. I reached over and flipped the glove compartment open more out of impulse than anything. I don't know what I was hoping to find. A flashlight. A reason. Something to hold in my hand so I didn't feel so helpless. But it was empty. Completely empty. I didn't remember clearing it out. Then the fog outside the car parted just enough for me to see something standing on the side of the road up ahead. I slowed to a crawl. It looked like a person. Same outline, same size, but not right. Its head hung too low like it didn't know how to hold the weight of it. Its arms dangled at its sides, elbows locked straight. As I inched closer, I realized its face was turned not toward the road, but toward me, toward the passenger side. I passed it slowly, every muscle in my body clenched. It didn't move, not even to blink, but just as I cleared it, I heard something that turned my blood to ice. 3 fingers, tapping the passenger window, tap, tap, tap. I whipped my head toward the sound hard hammering, but there was nothing there, just fog, just glass. But the outline on the window, that faint reflection of a face I'd been pretending wasn't, there was now perfectly clear. It was smiling. Not a friendly smile, not even human. Just teeth too wide, stretching impossibly across the glass. And it didn't fade when I turned on the light. It grinned back at me like it had always been there. Like it had never left. I swerved. Not off the road, but just enough for the tires to clip the edge of the shoulder. The car thudded and bounced, and for a second I thought I'd lose control. But I pulled it straight again, hard in my throat. The smile on the window was gone, completely vanished. But the pressure in the air didn't lift. It only grew heavier, thicker, like the atmosphere in the car was being sucked out inch by inch. My fingers trembled on the wheel. I checked the rearview mirror instinctively, but all I saw was a wall of fog. No road, no trees, no sign of the figure I'd passed, or maybe hadn't passed at all. It felt like I hadn't moved an inch, like I'd been stuck on the same stretch of Route 19 since that first flicker in the trees. Then the breathing came back. Not just in my ears this time. I could hear it behind me. Wet, raspy, uneven, like someone struggling to exhale through a chest full of fluid. And then came the pressure. Something pushed gently against the back of my seat like knees digging in from behind. I gritted my teeth and refused to look. I pressed harder on the gas. The road curved sharp ahead, but I didn't care. I just needed out. I needed distance. But as I made the turn, the headlights illuminated something lying across the road. A body? No blood, no motion. Just a pale figure crumpled in the fog legs, bent at impossible angles, arms thrown wide like it had fallen from great height. I slammed the brakes and skidded to a stop just feet away. The breathing behind me stopped. Silence returned, but not the comforting kind. It was the silence of a held breath, the kind of quiet where the air feels afraid. And that's when the dome light flicked on, not because I touched it, because something in the car had opened the passenger door. But the door was still shut, locked, and in the passenger window, clear as day, the smile had returned. Only this time it wasn't alone. There were 2 of them now. 2 smiling faces reflected in the passenger window, identical grins, stretched far past anything human, as if the skin had forgotten where to stop. One face hovered where the reflection had always been near the seat. The other loomed higher just behind it, as if leaning forward from the back seat. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I reached for my phone, desperate to call anyone, but the screen was black. Not dead, just blank. No light, no response. I jabbed the power button again and again until my thumb ached, but it didn't flicker once. That's when I noticed the reflection of my own face. Wasn't mine, not exactly. It was sitting in the driver's seat like me. Same shirt, same hair. But the eyes weren't right. They were wide, unblinking, and too dark. And the mouth, it was smiling too. But I wasn't. My hands were frozen on the wheel, but in the reflection they twitched, tapped, shifted subtly. The version of me in the window was moving differently. I turned to the passenger side, slowly, unwillingly. Still empty. No one in the seat. But when I looked back at the reflection, there was someone sitting next to me. A third shape now. Its head leaned sideways, resting too close to mine. Its mouth still wide, still stretching. It looked like it was whispering something, but the glass muted all sound. Until I heard it, not through my ears, but from inside my own mind. You're the one who looked. The engine cut off. Everything went black. The headlights died, and the dash blinked out. The dome, light fizzled. For a heartbeat, the car was just a steel coffin surrounded by fog. Then one by one, the reflections began to fade, until only mine remained. But the smile stayed, and the eyes, they blinked. But I hadn't. When the engine roared back to life, it wasn't because I turned the key. It just started without warning, flickering the headlights back on, the dash lights sputtering like they were coughing themselves awake. My body jolted as if something had let go. My fingers clenched the wheel so tightly that my knuckles cracked when I finally let them move. The fog had thinned slightly, just enough to see the road ahead again. The body was gone. No pale limbs, no broken angles, no sign that anything had ever been lying there. But something was different. The passenger seat no longer felt empty. I didn't see anyone there, not directly. But the weight had changed. The air shifted like someone had leaned back, adjusted the seatbelt, and settled in for the rest of the ride. I didn't say a word, didn't ask questions. I just drove. 30 minutes later, I reached the drop-off point, a dimly lit warehouse at the edge of the county. I left the package on the loading dock, signed the clipboard, and climbed back into my car like nothing had happened. Like I wasn't still shaking. Like I wasn't afraid to check the passenger window again. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I've driven that same route 6 times. Every time, no matter what hour I start or how many detours I take, I always end up back on Route 19 once the sun goes down. The GPS reroutes me. The signs disappear. The fog finds me. And every time when the road narrows near the swamp, I hear it again. That shallow breathing. That smile forming in the glass. Sometimes I see something new. A handprint on the inside of the windshield. A finger slowly dragging across the dashboard, drawing symbols I don't understand. Once the radio crackled to life by itself, and it whispered my name. I've stopped telling people about it. No one believes you when the thing haunting you doesn't leave footprints or bruises. Just a reflection. Just a grin. Waiting in the passenger window for you to look again. Thank you for venturing into the darkness with us. If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't keep the fear to yourself. Leave a comment, smash that like button, and share this video with someone who dares to listen in the dark. We release terrifying true stories every week, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's lurking in the shadows. This is High Scare Stories, where nightmares don't end when the video does. Until next time, stay safe and stay scared.